James Frey, the man, the myth, the memoirist, but only if you consider his memoir to be a memoir, despite the fact that he lied throughout it and then got called out for it on national TV. Hi, my name's Rachel, and today we're doing Authors Behaving Badly. Today's author is James Frey. If you think that I hold contempt for anybody that I've ever talked about on this channel, please know that the person who is an author who I really hold contempt for is unequivocally James Frey. This is the author that I can be accused of really deeply disliking. You might think, I don't recognize the name James Frey. Yes, you do. He's also known as who wrote I Am Number 4, but he made major headlines in the 2000s regarding his memoir, A Million Little Pieces, which I read in high school. The book that tore out Oprah's heart and my own and stomped on it with all of the smugness of a guy who thinks that truth is whatever the wind blows him in the direction of that day, or whatever sounds really tough and cool. James Frey, again, has been on my personal crap list for years over his memoir. The memoir is supposed to be about James's struggle with addiction and his time in a rehab center. How dare you make me, 16-year-old me, care about you, only to find out that you were bending facts like an expert contortionist.
You don't believe me, do you?
Of course not.
But he didn't stop at A Million Little Pieces. No. James Frey, in my opinion, has made a career out of taking poor behavior and turning it into a business model.
What's your problem, schmuck? I'm an inconsiderate prick!
And it's working because he just got published again. And readers are angry because he talked about gleefully using AI in his writing of this book. James Frey single-handedly proved to me that publishing meritocracy is a myth. I don't know that James Frey has ever made a decision in his author career that hasn't pissed me off. Meanwhile, other authors work 4 times as hard to get half as much as James has been given. His marketing is piss off Oprah, lie, be edgy, and then be mad that people don't like any of that. And somehow publishing still rewards him for this. If you're a normal, not awful person trying to find a marketing strategy, might I suggest a website rather than lying in your memoir? And you can create your own website with the help of today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Squarespace can help you make any kind of website that you want to help you stand out in the vast ocean that is the internet. Squarespace is an all-in-one website building platform that makes it so easy for you to have a professional, beautiful website of your own, for you to create or sell whatever it is that you make or talk to your audience. Whether you're an author trying to market your new book, or you're an editor looking to find a new client, or maybe you're an artist looking to sell your art or a book cover creator. Anything you do, Squarespace can help you showcase it and market it. Whether that's your services, your goods, or your website can just be a place to talk to your audience and showcase all of the different places that you're at on the internet and what you're creating on the internet. My website is readswithrachel.com. It has all the places you can find me, info about my book club. You can join my book club Discord from there. I have FAQs, I have a contact form. Squarespace made this super easy for me to set up because I don't know anything about website creation, but Squarespace has great templates that made it so simple for me to just customize according to my preferences. So whatever it is that you do, whether you are an author, hopefully not lying in your memoir, you're an artist, or you're selling merch, or you're marketing your skill set as an editor, or even a reviewer, Squarespace can help you make a beautiful website customized to your preferences, even if that includes selling your merchandise. And no worries if you have no experience with e-commerce, because Squarespace has e-commerce tools and a custom merch service that you can utilize without having to worry about things like inventory and shipping. Whatever your online presence is, or your business is, or both, Squarespace can help you organize it, market it to your audience, and help you find your place on the internet. For a free trial, go to squarespace.com, and then when you're ready to launch, you can use the QR code on the screen or go to squarespace.com/readswithrachel for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/readswithrachel. The link is down below, and thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Let's dive in, but here's your disclaimer. All of this is readily available info on the internet. It has been compiled with the help of today's MVP, which is Lou. Hi Lou, I love you. All of this is simply my opinions on the readily available information found on the internet about James Frey. I also do not recommend going and talking to James Frey. You don't need to @him on Twitter and talk about what a crap person he is. What good will that do? He already knows. He's known for 20 years. So don't harass people on the internet, and also don't lie in your memoir. And if you do lie in your memoir and you get called out for it, you don't get to be mad that you're the one who lied. All right, let's jump in. My PA, Lou, has broken this script down into several parts. The first part is called A Million Little Whys. However, it's more like a million little whats. It's just, it rhymes with a million little lies, which is, you know, what James allegedly is doing. So let's talk about the A Million Little Whats. Talk about the behind, like what's behind all of this. So the context for what happened in the 2000s is that in the 2000s, there became public appetite for recovery literature. We all like to see a redemption story, but there was a lot of recovery lit that focused on the downfall before the recovery, and A Million Little Pieces by James Frey fit so snugly into this. Now, add in that Oprah Winfrey started a book club, which was able to shape national conversation on literature. In comes James Frey, who publishes A Million Little Pieces in 2003, which seems perfect for the public appetite for this particular kind of redemption story. This gritty, profane, raw account of addiction and survival and eventual recovery. So James Frey comes in and he is a very particular personality. He, I think, thinks of himself as sort of like a bad boy, a very fuck the bullshit kind of guy, except the bullshit is the bullshit that he literally makes up. So, but it's very in line with how A Million Little Pieces was, which I can attest to because, again, I read that book at 16 and I was just sucked into this book. It's written in a very particular way, so there are no quotations. Here's an excerpt so you can see. This is A Million Little Pieces, and at the time I was like, this is the coolest fucking thing that I have ever read. And it was only after reading it that I Googled this guy and found out about the bullshit that he was spewing. But before he got in trouble for lying, he was celebrated for his raw voice, which I can attest to. I got sucked into it too. And he became a household name, just not in my household apparently. My dad, to be fair, was really busy watching Glenn Beck, and my mom didn't have cable, so I wouldn't have known that this happened. So A Million Little Lies. Let's start with the controversy around A Million Little Pieces. This is sort of the foundational scandal of James Frey, but it was not the last scandal of James Frey. But this international scandal that erupted over his debut work is still something he's talking about in 2025. And so am I, but I didn't do it. So if I had done it, I wouldn't be talking about it like a pure, unadulterated dick. But I guess I'm just built different than James Frey.
What's your problem, schmuck? I'm an inconsiderate prick!
So let me preface this by saying that something that we talked about at BookNet Fest is that in nonfiction, there was a nonfiction panel at BookNet Fest, which was so good. And they talked about the fact that nonfiction books don't often get fact-checked by the publisher. Memoirs in particular, how would you fact-check somebody's own story of what happened to them, right? Because a lot of it is going to be introspective, and how can you fact-check something introspective? But you can fact-check whether or not somebody got arrested, whether or not somebody did a stint in rehab. And James Frey's memoir, A Million Little Pieces, was about such things. It was published by Doubleday in 2003, and it was marketed and sold as a memoir detailing James Frey's experiences with severe drug and alcohol addiction. The book opens with this passage, I'll read it to you. I wake to the drone of an airplane engine and the feeling of something warm dripping down my chin. My 4 front teeth are gone, I have a hole in my cheek, my nose is broken, and my eyes are swollen nearly shut. I look at my clothes, and my clothes are covered with a colorful mixture of spit, snot, urine, vomit, and blood. So it comes in swinging, right? And this captivated readers, including but not limited to Oprah. We will come back to that. In the memoir, James Frey is talking about being a 23-year-old, being an addict who is entering a rehab facility, him defying the traditional 12-step program, and a path towards recovery that is self-directed. And again, the book's appeal is this unflinching, brutal, honest account in this very particular writing style, cataloging this survival story that happens, against all odds. Some of the odds just being James Frey had to be a bad boy about everything, which I see now at 33, half my life ago. At 16, I was like, no, he's just a guy that's been jerked around and he's, take no shit kind of guy. I wish I could go back in time and tell past me, don't read this, read something else. There's so much more. But this very particular writing style, this very what was perceived to be an authentic account of a very particular kind of guy made this book just compulsively consumable to millions of people. And it was a success at first, but then it really took off when it got chosen for Oprah Winfrey's book club. But with the visibility came more scrutiny of the parts of the memoir that turned out not to be true. So then in 2006, a website called The Smoking Gun publishes this very meticulously researched article about James Frey called A Million Little Lies. Part of the beginning of the book is talking about how he got arrested. He's supposed to have fair amount of criminal history. They dived into public records, police reports, court documents, interviewed law enforcement officials, and then they wrote this expose alleging that James Frey had either entirely fabricated or super embellished details of his purported criminal career. It turns out that other media outlets had also been talking about James Frey trying to find information on this, but the Smoking Gun report was really the big deal where people were like, oh, so he's full of shit? And the thing is that this was a systematic exaggeration pattern that they were pointing out. Not minor details of his book, but the big points of the book, the things that he said, I was so bad and I did all these things, were not true. The high stakes events that formed his redemption story were false. It turns out that he was trying to construct a persona that was violent and damaged. He was trying to be Jared Leto's version of the Joker. So for instance, in the book, he says that he went through an 87-day jail sentence because he was in a altercation with police that was very violent. But in the Smoking Gun report, they said that he was held at a police station for no more than 5 hours for minor offenses, and then he posted bond after a few hours. And the arresting officer said that James Frey was polite and cooperative. Meanwhile, James Frey's account was, I was high on crack and I had hurt those police officers and then I served 87 days in jail. He claimed things like being wanted in several states on possession charges, but police documents, court documents only show minor offenses. When the Smoking Gun confronted him Friday, January 6th, afternoon with our findings, Frey refused to address the significant conflicts we discovered between his published accounts and those contained in various police reports. When we suggested that he might owe millions of readers and Winfrey fans an explanation for these discrepancies, Frey, now a publishing powerhouse, replied, "There's nothing at this point can come out of this conversation that is good for me." They said that after this, Frey said that he hired an attorney whose law firm handles litigation for A-list celebrities like Jennifer Aniston and Catherine Zeta-Jones and Britney Spears. So then the lawyer, Singer, emailed a 5-page letter threatening a lawsuit if we published a story stating that Frey was a liar and or that he fabricated or falsified background as reflected in A Million Little Pieces. Frey then published on his website an email that the Smoking Gun had sent him earlier in the day requesting a final interview, and the Smoking Gun considered this a preemptive strike on Frey's part as a waiver of confidentiality. Frey said that he was posting the letter to inform fans of this latest attempt to discredit me. So he, if I'm reading this correctly, understood that his fan base was a powerful tool that he could use and actively tried to weaponize it against this website for simply trying to post the truth that he admits he embellished. What's interesting is he said this was, Frey wrote, an effort to be consistent with my policy of openness and transparency. The article says, strangely, this policy seemed to have lapsed in recent weeks when Frey, in interviews with the Smoking Gun, repeatedly refused to talk on the record about various matters, declined our request to review court and criminal records he says he possesses, and continued to peddle book tales directly that were contradicted by various law enforcement records and officials. But then during these interviews, he finally admits for the first time that he embellished central details of his criminal career and purported incarceration for obvious dramatic reasons in the nonfiction work. He also admitted to taking steps around the time A Million Little Pieces was published to hardcover in 2003 to legally expunge court records related to the seemingly most egregious criminal activity of his lifetime, that episode of violent crack-fueled confrontation with Ohio cops that resulted in a passage of serious felony charges is crucial as a moment in A Million Little Pieces, serving as narrative maypole around which many other key dramatic scenes revolve and depend upon for their suspense and conflict. Frey has repeatedly asserted in press interviews that the book is all true. He told Winfrey, "I think I wrote about the events in the book truly and honestly and accurately." The author told us that he had the court record purged in a bid to erect walls around myself. Referring to our inquiries about his past criminal career, Frey noted, "I wanted to put up walls as much as I possibly could, frankly, to avoid situations like this. The walls," he added, "served to keep people away from me and to keep people away from my private business. So much for the openness and transparency." Now, I think that openness and transparency is great. I also think that wanting to erect walls around yourself to keep your private business away from people is great, but the answer to doing both those things is not to lie and call it truth. So why would a man who spends 430 pages chronicling every grimy and repulsive detail of his formerly debased life and then goes on to talk about it nonstop with everybody from bloggers to Oprah herself need to wall off the details of a decade-old arrest? When you spend paragraphs describing the viscosity of your own vomit, your sexual failings, and the nightmare of shitting blood daily, who knew bashfulness was still possible, especially from a guy who wears the tattooed acronym FTBSITTTD, fuck the bullshit, it's time to throw down.
That's the funniest damn thing I've ever heard!
Pursuing Frey documents, we were struck by the number of people the Smoking Gun contacted who were either reading or had already read A Million Little Pieces as a result of the Winfrey endorsement. When we sent copies of the book to a pair of male cops, the volumes were quickly commandeered by their respective significant others. So this article is talking about how often women in particular, or this part of the Smoking Gun report is talking about how often women in particular were likely to read this book. Now, it's important to note that I actually got this book from a woman myself. It wasn't my dad, it wasn't my mom, but it was my dad's, at the time, girlfriend. She was reading it, she finished it, she loved it, and she was like, "If you want to read it, go ahead." I don't know why she thought it was appropriate to give to a 16-year-old, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, I also got this book from a woman, so it is interesting, and that experience, my anecdotal experience, is in line with how often women in particular were reading this book. When a Michigan sheriff's aide sent us an old Frey mugshot, she enclosed a handwritten letter noting, "And by the way, I am reading his first book, A Million Little Pieces, and can't put it down." An Ohio police chief told us that his dispatcher had finished the book 2 weeks before we first called. Friends and relatives too were reading Frey, with one acquaintance reporting that she bought the book after seeing 3 other women reading it in her Metro North Railroad car. It was after the Oprah show aired that the Smoking Gun first took a look at Frey. We had simply planned to track down one of his many mugshots and add it to our site's large collection. While Frey offers no specific details about when and where he was collared, the book does mention 3 states where he ran into trouble: Ohio, Michigan, and North Carolina. When we asked Frey if his reporting of the laundry list of juvenile crimes and arrests was accurate, he answered, "Yeah, some of them are, some of them aren't. I mean, I just sort of try to play off memory for that stuff."
Now let me get this straight. That would mean that you lied.
I just try to play off memory for that stuff. As a person who, as a juvenile, was put into a psychiatric facility, I remember that very well. I don't know, I just can't relate to not knowing stuff in my youth, and then if I don't know, I just make it up. I can't relate to that, but again, maybe I'm just built different than James Frey. The article talks about a lot of minor embellishments, but this is the one that I really want to read to you. 3 months after his Michigan arrest, Frey began his studies at Denison University, a liberal arts school in central Ohio of Granville. It was here, according to the book A Million Little Pieces, that Frey majored in substance abuse. He blacked out, vomited, bled from his nose. This abuse of alcohol and drugs exacerbated Frey's rage, anger, and extreme pain, a self-destructive cocktail that he named the Fury, capital F. His habits were underwritten by a monthly allowance from his wealthy and unwitting folks. His dad was a top executive. During these drug-addled Denison days, Frey wrote, "Lying became part of my life. I lied if I needed to get something or get out of something."
Nothing further, Your Honor.
While Frey claims to have been arrested several times during colleges, TSG found evidence of only one bust, and it's the single crime for which he offers any significant details in A Million Little Pieces. Though Frey provides no dates, the incident occurred in October 1992, about 5 months after his Denison graduation. As he tells it, Frey returned to Ohio in a bid to reconcile with a college girlfriend who, it turned out, wanted nothing to do with him. I was crushed. I went out. I drank as much as I could, smoked as much crack as I could. When I was good and loaded, I decided to go find her and try to talk to her again. He had to go look for her at a local bar. Here's the account from A Million Little Pieces. As I was driving up, I saw her standing out front with a few of her friends. I was staring at her and not paying attention to the road, and I drove up onto the sidewalk and hit a cop who was standing there.
You know why I pulled you over?
Depends on how long you were following me.
I didn't hit him hard because I was only going about 5 miles an hour, but I hit him. The cop called for backup. I sat in the car and stared at her and waited. The backup came. They approached the car and asked me to get out, and I said, "You want me out? Then get me out, you fucking pigs." They opened the door. I started swinging, and they beat my ass with billy clubs and arrested me. As they hauled me away, kicking and screaming, I tried to get the crowd to attack them and free me, which didn't happen. Oh boy.
Why don't we just take it from the top?
Here goes. I sped. I followed too closely. I ran a stop sign. I almost hit a Chevy. I sped some more. I failed to yield at a crosswalk.
Frey was arraigned the following morning, released after a friend posted bail with a credit card. He was hit with an imposing set of criminal charges: assault with a deadly weapon, assaulting an officer, etc., etc. So this is several pages of A Million Little Pieces, where it's talking about the case and what happened. In the end, it's good news. The Ohio prosecutor had magically encountered some problems, and there were some issues with missing evidence, and that he had received only a couple of phone calls on your behalf. Frey had only weeks earlier agreed to 3 years in prison, but Randall explained that the prosecutor, who goes unnamed, had suddenly turned course. He was now willing, in return for Frey doing 3 to 6 months in county jail, willing to reduce to felony counts to misdemeanors and wipe Frey's record if he completed a 3-year probation term.
I changed lanes in the intersection. I changed lanes without signaling while running a red light and speeding.
When the smoking gun read Frey's description of the arrest, the related criminal charges, and the case's strange deposition, we first attempted to find court records related to the incident. We assumed correctly, as it turned out, it might have occurred in Licking County, Ohio. When we reviewed the mayor's court dockets in Granville, there was also no record for Frey. And all they could find when they looked was a single matter that turned up: a traffic ticket for speeding and driving without a speed belt in 1990.
Is that all?
No. I have unpaid parking tickets.
When we ran Frey's name past Robert Becker, Licking County's prosecuting attorney, he could find no record in his office which deals with felony prosecutions. To review, there was no patrolman struck with a car. There was no urgent call for backup. There was no rebuff request to exit the car. There was no "you want me out, then get me out." There was no fucking pigs taunt. There were no swings at cops. There were no billy club beatdowns. There was no kicking and screaming. There were no 30 witnesses. There was no .29 blood alcohol test. There was no crack. There was no assault with a deadly weapon, assaulting an officer of the law. And though he would later vividly write about being consumed by an internal rage that he named like a pet, Frey was somehow able to keep the fury in check on the night that actually happened, where he got the ticket for improper driving. And the patrolman who remembers this said that he was polite and cooperative. I guess the patrolman did not, in fact, get called a fucking pig. Here's the part that really pisses a lot of people off, including myself, about the things that James lied about in the book. While Frey's fabrications and embellishments of his criminal career and jail time are patently dishonest, the section of A Million Little Pieces that deals with the tragedy that took place while he was a high school student is downright creepy and detestable. This is the smoking gun's words, not mine, so let's behave, James. Hopefully he's never going to watch this. I don't really want to get a letter from his attorney trying to explain to me why lying is okay. On November 15th, 1986, a northbound locomotive pulling a caboose and headed for nearby Benton Harbor slammed broadside into a 1976 Oldsmobile. The two-door car was written by 17-year-old Dean Spurlick. Sharing the front seat with him was Jane Hall and Melissa Sanders, both 17. According to a St. Joseph Township Police Department, on the night Spurlick hosted a party at a residence where he was house sitting. Because of the crash, Hall and Sanders were dead. Spurlick was seriously injured. He tried to beat the train through an intersection. They were smashed into by the train. The car was dragged down the tracks, and Spurlick was sentenced to 6 months in jail and 2 years probation. investigation because of this. Sperlich did survive, but he was seriously injured and then had to serve sentence for what he did. When recreating the train incident in A Million Little Pieces, James Frey manipulates the time frame, claiming it occurred halfway through the 8th grade, just 6 months after he relocated at age 12 to St. Joseph from the Cleveland area. In fact, Sanders and Hall were high school seniors, and Frey, also 17, was a junior at the time of the crash. He also refers to Melissa Sanders as just Michelle in the book. Frey identified Michelle as Melissa Sanders in a December 14th TSG interview. While prepared to ask him questions about his supposed role in the train crash, Frey ended an interview Friday before we could explore that subject with him. How convenient!
You don't believe me, do you?
Of course not.
Frey introduces Michelle to readers by carrying on a conversation with the dead girl while showering one day at Hazelden. I say you've been on my mind lately. I say I may see you soon. I say please be there when I arrive. I'm looking forward to spending some time together. He goes on to explain how he met Michelle when he moved to their small town. He was an outsider. He was hated by the local kids. Michelle was popular, beautiful, and smart. She played sports. She was a cheerleader. She got straight A's, and for some reason she wanted to be James's friend. One day in English class, she passed him a note saying that he did not seem as awful as I hear you are. He wrote back, I am as awful as people say, and worse. When Michelle's friends wondered why she befriended the pariah Frey, she just ignored them since Michelle had too much going for her to make anyone make her suffer for our friendship. Halfway through the 8th grade, Michelle got asked out on a date by a high school boy. Michelle lied and said she was hanging out with Frey, her beard, for the night. Frey says that he went inside and watched the movie, pint of whiskey in hand, while Michelle got picked up there by her high school suitor. But as Michelle and the high school boy, a football hero, were driving back to the theater, presumably so that Michelle's parents could pick her up, he tried to beat a train across some tracks. His car got hit and Michelle was killed. She was my only friend. She got hit by a fucking train and killed. Oh my God. I don't know why you would lie about this. Surely, like anyone who lived in St. Joseph at the time of the accident, Frey knew that the 2 girls had died in the crash. But for the fabulous narrative purposes, Janie Hall needed to be thrown under that C&O locomotive, which was the other girl in the car. After learning about the accident the following day, the book says, I got blamed by her parents and by her friends and by everyone else in that fucking hellhole. If she hadn't lied and if I hadn't helped her, it would not have happened. If we hadn't gone to the theater, she would not have gone out on that date. Sure, a couple mangled girls laying in a hospital morgue, but that's narrative gold in the hands of James Frey. Holy shit! What a line.
He's a pedantic, pontificating, pretentious bastard.
The car's driver was unhurt and everyone felt sorry for him. It was poor Jimmy Frey who became the object of St. Joseph's scorn. I got taken down to the local police station and questioned. That's the way it worked here. Blame the fuck up, feel sorry for the football hero. He literally served time. Vilify one forever, forget the other had anything to do with it. I took a lot of punches for that bullshit, and every time I threw a punch back, I threw one back every single time. I threw it back for her. I threw it back as hard as I fucking could, and I threw it back for her. Standing in that Hazelden shower, Frey wishes he could again smell Michelle, touch her hair, tell her he loves her because I did and I do, and I never did it when she was still alive. This report, Frey's alternate reality is what the Smoking Gun calls it, is not reflected in the 16-page police report on the 1986 fatalities. There is no mention of him in the document.
Now let me get this straight. That would mean that you lied.
Though several other St. Joseph High School students were questioned by investigators. No one interviewed said anything about Sanders going to the movies that evening. The chief investigator said, I don't remember Mr. Frey. I don't remember that name. One of the mothers of the 2 17-year-olds who died said, she began to read the book but did not recognize many of the details surrounding her own daughter's death. Everything that I believe he wrote, even about my daughter, was not an actual the way it happened or anything. I never heard his name in connection with it.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
I don't believe he was ever actually questioned regarding to the accident because he had nothing to do with it. They may have been acquaintances, she said, and might have ridden on the same school bus. In a Q&A section on Winfrey's website, Frey recently answered, and this was again in 2006, a viewer's question about whether he ever spoke about the death of his high school girlfriend with his parents or a Hazelden staff psychologist. I discussed it a bit with my parents when it happened, but not that much. I've often kept things that hurt me the most to myself. I don't know if that's because they hurt so much to talk about, or if I just want them to be mine and mine alone. Okay, except it didn't happen. That didn't happen the way that you said it happened. So, I mean, you could just say, well, I embellished that, so I didn't really feel the need to talk about it with my parents or with Hazelden's staff, because what actually happened was very different from what I wrote in my supposed to be true memoir. He even lied about like the dentist stuff. So like the beginning of the book is talking about how he's like missing teeth. So he talks about having gotten dental surgery with no anesthesia, and then when he gets called out on Oprah, which we'll come back to, he's like, well, I don't actually know whether or not the doctor used Novocaine. So why lie about that other than to make yourself sound super cool and tough? I bet you that if James Frey could get pregnant, James Frey would be like, I went through the most intense birth of all time, and there were laser guns shooting, and I had to dodge lasers while I was giving birth in the most tough display of birth you've ever seen. He talks about things in the book that are the source of his trauma. Some of these he was not involved in at all. And this would have been like a global media scandal on its own, but then Oprah Winfrey was the person talking about this on TV at the time. I wonder if it would happen, and this is like the thing is like people are like, people lie all the time now. If James had done this in 2025, it wouldn't be a big deal. That's not great. That is awful. That's horrible how desensitized we are to people doing terrible things. But it is true that like now this would be received differently, and again, that's not a good thing, and it certainly doesn't lessen the impact of the horrible thing it is to like lie and not care that you lied and then also pretend that it's everybody else's fault. As stated, Oprah had chosen this book in 2005 for her book club, and it was her first nonfiction pick in ever or in a few years. This is supposedly responsible for it skyrocketing to the top of bestseller lists. Winfrey praised the book. She told her audience it was so raw, I couldn't put it down. And because Oprah Winfrey is trusted, you assume that the book in question is a real account, a real memoir, not fiction. And I'm not saying that autofiction isn't like a valid genre. I'm just saying that that's not why the book sold so well. The book sold so well because people thought that everything in it was actually real. That's what was selling at the time. And I think James knew that. So when the smoking gun expose comes out, James Frey is, of course, defensive. I'm so shocked. The liar gets called a liar and is defensive about it.
And the truth shall set you free!
So he goes on CNN on Larry King to defend himself, and he's like, sure, there were some embellishments, but I stand by the book's message, its core truth, which if you're talking about theme, you could have written a theme in fiction. And he said that he felt that his actions fell comfortably within the realm of what's appropriate for a memoir, which I don't think anybody will agree with that unless they're making money off of that memoir that he lied in, but okay. I don't think that consumers feel that way. I, a consumer of the book, certainly didn't feel that way. I felt fucking bamboozled when I realized that he was a goddamn liar. So then Oprah Winfrey calls into the show.
Whether or not the car's wheels rolled up on the sidewalk or whether he hit the police officer or didn't hit the police officer is irrelevant to me. What is relevant is that he stepped out of that history to be the man that he is today and to take that message to save other people and allow them to save themselves. That's what's important about this book.
Came to James' defense, called all this much ado about nothing, said that we should focus on the book's underlying message of redemption. She said that this book still resonated with her and with tons of others. So Oprah Winfrey's first instinct was to protect the emotional truth of the book, which is the argument that James Frey makes, is that, well, the emotional truth is there, which you can just say core message because it's not a truth. It is categorically fake. Just because it's a theme that resonates with people does not make it an emotional truth. Words mean things, I fear. In between this interview and 2 weeks later, Oprah's position is shifting. Frey has a scheduled second appearance on Oprah. Public outcry grows. Oprah probably felt that her own credibility was on the line. So she invites Frey and I believe his agent onto her show in a very famous interview now, where Oprah delivers lines to James like this.
I don't know what is true, and I don't know what isn't. So first of all, I wanted to start with the smoking gun report, titled The Man Who Conned Oprah. I want to know where they write.
Most of what they wrote was pretty accurate, absolutely.
This got described as a brutal takedown and a flaying. James Frey and company were not happy about this. This definitely was a moment in television that showed like just how much power Oprah has to shape public opinion, or at least, Oprah and her show. You can't actually find the full episode of this online. You can only find bits and pieces, which is like really frustrating for, people trying to see like the full truth and the full scope of what happened. In the process of creating this video, Lou was like, I can't find that video anywhere. And that's because nobody can find the full video anywhere. Then in 2011, during the final season of that show, Oprah brings back James Frey. She said that she was apologizing and regretted confronting him in the way that she had done it, but not confronting him as a whole.
So I had called him up and personally apologized to him. I never imagined doing it on television or didn't want to make a big display about it because it wasn't about, now let me apologize. And he was receptive to the apology.
I don't know how else to say it. I thought it was big of you. And I thought it was cool.
And she said that she didn't approach the situation with the compassion that she normally strived for.
Whatever happened because I created that situation. And if anything, you deserve the apology more than I deserve one.
But my apology is not for what I said, it's for the way that I said it.
Well, thank you.
What people saw was my lack of compassion.
After this, Oprah said that she considered James a trusted friend, but then in a more recent article with the New York Times, you can see that James Frey is still very resentful of Oprah Winfrey and also is mad that he got called out for being a liar when he believes that Oprah has lied to the public more than he has, which is such a sleazebag move. Yeah, I lied, but look how many times Oprah Winfrey lied. You are actually allergic to accountability, in my opinion. A lot of angry and disillusioned readers got together and filed a class action lawsuit against James Frey and his publisher, alleging consumer fraud, which 16-year-old me, I don't know if I knew this back then. I don't know when the lawsuit was, but 16-year-old me would have been like, sign me up, I was duped, I cared about this man. I literally, I was so mad when I found out about this. I called a friend on my cell phone. Remember how we used to call it people back in the day? I called a friend on my cell phone. I was like, you would not believe I read this book and this man lied to me. It was juicy gossip too. It was a few years late, but it was juicy gossip. The central claim of this lawsuit was that they had been deceived into purchasing the book under false pretenses that it was a factual memoir. Less than 2,000 people came forward to seek a refund. The total amount paid to readers was $27,348. What? $27,348, and that's total from, about 2,000 people, but the settlement was for $2.35 million, and that mostly went to legal fees for both sides and charitable contributions. Would I join a lawsuit now as an adult feeling like a betrayed reader? No, I was definitely more pissed off in, my teen years reading this and feeling duped. I can understand feeling duped, but now I have to think what does that actually achieve? James Frey was dropped by his literary agent because of this. He had already published a second book, My Friend Leonard, and he was supposed to publish for a 2-book contract in, I believe, a 7-figure deal, and that ended up being canceled by the publisher due to the backlash of all of this. Warner Brothers at the time was considering a film adaptation of A Million Little Pieces, and they were reconsidering it at this point. A Million Little Pieces did in fact get made into a movie eventually. So in just a short span of time, James Frey went to being hot shit to social pariah. I do wonder if this was the moment that we learned collectively as a society that publishers don't fact check nonfiction books. I wonder what we thought of that before. I wonder whose responsibility we thought that was. And even the mass majority of the public still does not know that publishers do not have to fact check books. The publisher admitted that nobody at Doubleday had made any effort to verify the claims made in James Frey's memoir. And again, the public had no idea that that was standard industry practice. So seeing the lawsuit and knowing that, I wonder if the public feels that they have any power to push for such a thing, because obviously we want stories that are labeled memoirs to actually be true. Do we as consumers have the right to not be mismarketed to? Absolutely. But what power do we really have to get publishers to do that, and who is going to enforce that? So I think that we stay stuck here even, 20 years later. This also ignited a argument about the very definition of the word memoir. James Frey went through this period of trying to convince people about emotional truth, saying that the book was true to his emotional reality as an addict in recovery, which I can't imagine sitting there and thinking like, I've got it. I will tell them that emotionally it's true. I guess that Ben Shapiro was not out here in 2006 yelling, facts don't care about your feelings. Maybe that could have prevented this. Maybe Ben Shapiro saying that actually could have done some good in the world. And of course, James Frey's position was supported by none other than often has weird and or bad takes Joyce Carol Oates, who commented saying that the personal memoir is always colored by a person's emotional truth. And I'm like, okay, I get that y'all love the idea of emotional truth, but like in actual reality, that's not a thing. If you wanted to discuss that theme, you could have wrote fiction. You didn't need to pass it off as a memoir. You did that because you knew it would sell better. In my opinion, that's what happened. And you're just trying to find like a colorful way to make it sound okay that you lied to consumers. They're like, well, the defenders of this idea were like, well, memoir comes from the word memory, and memory is subjective. And it's like, okay, but
the car's driver was unhurt and everyone felt sorry for him. It was poor Jimmy Frey who became the object of St. Joseph's scorn. I got taken down to the local police station and questioned. That's the way it worked here. Blame the fuck up, feel sorry for the football hero.
That's a thing that quite literally did not happen. It's not his faulty memory. He just made it up. If you wanted to create a persona to write about, fine, but call it what it is. Call it a persona. Don't pass it off as things that actually happened to you and then get mad when people say this didn't actually happen to you. You lied to us. And then he just expands on this idea later in his life. Like he's been making this bad argument for years. Now he's like, well, Picasso, if Picasso makes a portrait of himself, if it's not photorealist, is it invalid? No. Because Picasso is not saying this is a beat for beat interpretation of me. Picasso's not saying he's made of paint. You said you spent time in prison for beating up cops while you were on crack. That's a lot different than Picasso not being able to make a photorealist version of himself. Like, is this an actual argument that you're making? But of course, there's nothing left to do when you get called out for being a liar but to reframe the debate entirely as truth is whatever I make it. Truth is fluid. It's a fluid concept. It's not a fluid concept. It simply didn't happen. He created a false version of himself. So now, in like the more recent years, after all of this, after this intense public shaming, he really wants you to believe the narrative that the controversy freed him to be radical, to break rules and to not care what other people think. I can't think of anybody caring more about, like, I can't think of anybody who cares more about what other people think than this guy. Clearly you do care what other people think, because if you didn't, you wouldn't have lied in your memoir to make yourself sound tougher and cooler. And you wouldn't be trying to reshape the narrative now instead of just being like, I lied because I wanted to sound cool. You wouldn't be like, yeah, but the truth is whatever I make it. No, you lied and you didn't think you could sell books otherwise. But he wasn't done, because years after the A Million Little Pieces scandal, he found himself at the center of another controversy, not because he lied in a memoir again, or didn't do the emotional truth in the way that all the people in the reading world wanted or whatever. He founded a young adult book packaging company called Fathom Five, and this is wherein he published I Am Number 4 by Pittacus Lore. So the business model was to develop commercial story ideas in-house and then hire writers, like recent graduates of MFA programs, to flesh them out into full-length books so that he could have this book packaging house that was creating books that were turning into the next Twilight and Hunger Games, which could be licensed for film and merchandise and TV. Immediately, this gets some pushback. The New York called this a fiction factory and accused James Frey of using MFA students as cheap labor to churn out commercial young adult books because the amount that they were getting paid was low. Frey defended his system, saying that it was analogous to workshop systems used by successful visual artists like Jeff Koons, who employ teams of assistants to execute their ideas, which this defense did not go over well because it sounds an awful lot like creating a corporate model for artistic creation. So then a contract from Fathom Five, this business that he created, was leaked online. The terms of the contract were seen as not super appropriate and were condemned by authors and agents as being exploitative because the contracts that Fathom Five provided for the people actually writing these books stripped the writer of the book of all of the traditional authorial rights and financial power. So the Fathom Five contract gave $250 upon signing to the author, and then sometimes another $250 upon completion of the manuscript for the idea from Fathom Five. This is obviously not a livable wage, which is already a problem in traditional publishing. Full manuscript can sometimes take months to write, so you're working for months for maybe $250, maybe $500. And then as far as royalties go, the writer was promised a percentage of future revenues, but Fathom Five would retain control over all the accounting and all of the subsidiary rights, so television, film, merchandise, which means that the writer had little or no transparency or power in the financial aspect if the work is successful. And because Fathom Five was only paying $250, they had such low financial risk. So the only person really losing out here seems to have been the writers. Fathom Five also owns the copyright for the work, and the writer would be financially responsible for any legal action brought against the book. The writer had no ownership of the work that they created. They would basically be a ghostwriter without typical pay or protections for that role, and they assumed legal risk for a product that they didn't technically own. Fathom Five also was the one who would be deciding whether or not the book would be under the writer's name or a pseudonym, which means that the writers would not be able to build a reputation off of their work. The writers had to sign an NDA, which would prevent them from speaking out if they wanted to talk about any potential exploitation. The writers also couldn't sign any other contracts that would conflict with FFF productions that they were working on, which means that they could be prohibited from pursuing other potential career opportunities. Some authors who worked for Fathom Five argued, you guys are just focusing on the James Frey of it all because you guys don't like James Frey and you just don't really understand the realities of the publishing industry. This is, Fathom Five is going to allow people to get agents and allow people to get a traditional publishing deal. And the company did, as I said, publish I Am Number 4. So this was the credit for being Pittacus lore and writing I Am Number 4 goes to both James Frey and Joby Hughes. The book became a bestseller. It was adapted into a movie. I hate that movie. But the company never recovered from the contract controversy. Eventually, FFF became pretty much defunct, and then James Frey sold it. I do wonder about the where are they now of it all, because the defenders of FFF's contract were saying, sure, it's a crappy deal, but it's a great opportunity. Isn't this a worthwhile trade-off to break into a notoriously difficult industry? And it's isn't that the wrong question? If you are giving people scraps when you can give them more than scraps, when you have the ability to give them more than scraps, the people pointing out, hey, those are scraps are not the problem. The people supplying the scraps are the problem. There's always a shift to try to redirect attention to something else that isn't the bullshit. The Fathom Five issue reflects, it echoes the issue that we saw with the A Million Little Pieces scandal. In the case of A Million Little Pieces, readers and their emotional attachment to a story that they were emotionally attached to because they thought it was real, that got exploited. In this case, authors themselves, people who were trying to break into the publishing industry, were exploited. But of course, it's never James Frey's fault. And now, instead of using other people to become a bestseller, James Frey, always positioning himself on the bleeding edge of literary controversy, has an issue in the public eye with his most recent project, which has seen him openly embrace the use of artificial intelligence in the composition of his work. Jesus Christ, I have ink all over my pants. I got a tattoo done yesterday. I got a tattoo cover up yesterday, and I have the new skin on, and it's just bleeding all over my pants because the new skin broke up top. Fuck, I'm over here like, James Frey, and I'm like wiping ink off on my dirty pants. Great, this is the quality content that y'all come here for. Okay, so the AI issue. James Frey says of AI that he is not afraid of tools that will help him improve his work. See, previously he viewed other humans as tools that can help him improve his work, but now he's using AI. At least he doesn't have to pay AI $250. That would just break the bank, wouldn't it? Book of the Month got a lot of backlash and a lot of influencers, including me, who stopped working with them because they decided to promote James Frey in a recent month when he came out with his new book, which he admitted that he wrote with the help of AI. I don't feel the need to go over the AI stuff other than to say, it's clear to me that James Frey can't just write a book. He can't just write a book without lying. He couldn't just write a book without only paying MFA students or former MFA students $250, maybe $500, and also not giving them a worthwhile contract. He couldn't write a book without saying, sure, I lied, but it's emotional truth that counts, whatever that means, even though, the lawsuit disagreed. And now he apparently can't just sit down and write a story. You love making shit up, but now you can't do it without AI? All the while also talking about the brutal hypocrisy of Oprah calling out his lies 20 years ago because Oprah's the real liar. James Frey is not the only man on my shit list for lying about things that they claimed happened to them that didn't happen to them. There's also the guy who wrote 3 Cups of Tea and the guy who wrote Papillon. Papillon, in particular, Carlos is the one that read this, and it was recommended to him by a friend, and he read it and he was like, man, this is an unbelievable story. No, but literally, because he had the same thing happen to him with Papillon as I had happened to me with James Frey, because he found out that the guy who wrote Papillon lied. I was saved before reading 3 Cups of Tea because my mother gave me this book, and then my friend was like, dude's a liar. And I was like, thank you for telling me now before I finish it, because I have been lied to before. And when I said that, I specifically meant A Million Little Pieces by James Frey. We could do a whole video on just men who lie. If you would like to see a video on talking about the other 3 men who lie in their nonfiction books about things that happened to them that didn't happen to them, we could do that. Let me know down below. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it this far, you can leave a nose emoji down below. Like Pinocchio. It just grows and grows and grows every time we lie. Thanks so much for watching. Comments and questions go down below. And that's it. Okay, bye.
Hi, before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Ashley H, Beck, Call Me Kodiak, Choco's Homesick for Taiwan, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emerald Dodge, Eric D, Jade, Jill, John E, Jory, Julie, Kai Brecker has not read 6 of Crows, Kalane OK, Katya, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lady Chips Loves Pride, Lemon Jelly, Lex, Other Lex, Lily, Maddie Miss, Megwin Rose, Melissa, Mixer Boneless, Not So Secretly a Skeleton, Peggy Lou Who, Piloting SRN, Rain, Ree, SJ, Samar, Scarlet, Steph B, 3 Raccoons in a Trench Coat, Urchin Audrey, and White Raven 13. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend. Huge thank you to my Potato Starch Marxist patrons, Aaron, Alejandra, Alicia, Bobisha, Banana, Fofana, Fofisha. What are we doing, Alicia? Althea, Amanda D, Andy, Angelica, Artie the Ninth, Ava, Barry, Baywing, Beck, Blue Moon Syrup, Bookish by Jenna, Bookish Rabbit, Bridget 108, Kate B, Caitlin, Carlin, Carly, Casper, Kate, Kathy, Celeste, Che, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Cosmic Frog, Courtney, Darius, Danielle, Danita, Darren, Desiree Michelle, Dilf Enthusiast, Dorothea Supports Public Education, Draco-chan, Drive-By Thinker, Ebby, Emma, Aaron with 2 E's, Erica May, Aaron Starlight, Fox Waifu, Francis, Gadarn, Hannah C, Helen P, Hurry Singh, JM Tennant, Jackalope Max, Jay is on Olympus, Jelly V, Jen Michelle, Genderqueer, Jenny G, Jesse Ives, Jessa Sue, Jojo Bookish, Juicy Wizard, Caitlin M, Katie L, Katrina, Kayla, Kaylee, Kayala, Kendra, Kiara, KMTB, Kayana, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura is Angry, Lauren G, Lazarus Ray, Lindsay M, LP, Lou Siri, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Mataraptor, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Megan, Malara, Mima Who, Morgan the Friendly Ghost, Myth Lesbian, NM Rap, Natural Blues, Nicole G, Paige P, Penelope, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Pick a God and Pray, Plague Carrier, Pandemonium, Queen Cereal, Rach, Rachel B, Rebecca, Rebecca R, Ren Flynn, Rhea, Reese, Ronnie, Rosie, Sikoria, Saintbringer, Sakya Lume, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Shamed, Shannon, Sheen Onion, Sean, Sophie, Talia, That One Cute Chick, This Is Not a Trap, Too Thick to Work Tomorrow, Triple M, Tito Phoenix, and Unicorn Jenny. Thank you all so much for being a friend.